Good evening, classmates, and good evening, Dr. Abenes. I'm Hazel, Angelyn, Tesoro, and tonight, let me present to you the summary of our recorded discussion on the first chapter of the book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I'm with my group mates, Sir Gary Antonio Lirio and Ma'am Carla Jobelle Culajara. So first up, let me talk about humanization. Humanization is both an ontological and a historical vocation, which is a process of becoming more fully human that oppressed people use to become freer and affirm their identities. Humanization can help to break down enemy images or damaging stereotypes. This is the key to prevent violence. Now, what is dehumanization? It is something about depriving the rights or making people less human. Dehumanization is the process of degrading a person or a group of their positive human qualities. A practical definition refers to as the viewing and treatment of other persons as though they lack the mental capacities that are commonly attributed to human beings, especially by denying them autonomy, individuality, and a sense of dignity, thereby dehumanizing them. Now, who are the oppressed? The oppressed are people who are treated cruelly or are prevented from having the same opportunities like the others, such as freedom and benefits, and they are grounded in their desire to be human. They are the ones who are incapable of fighting for what is right, deprived of to be part of a success of a structure, say an organization, because they have no rights. Without freedom, they cannot live authentically, and they are the ones who are helpless, deprived of their opportunity to become the voice, and they have no purposes except the ones that their oppressors prescribe for them. Now, who are the oppressors? The oppressors control others by taking away the rights of the people whom they oppress. Those who exploit violence, dehumanize others, those who despise, those who initiate hatred, those who use force to coerce people, they have this unrestrained eagerness to possess, and they are the oppressors. They are also the unloved, kulang sa aruga, the ones who think they are right in everything and that the decisions they have made are the ones that is the final say in a structure or an organization. So what is oppression? Oppression refers to not allowing people to have a voice for the defense of their rights. It is a process that causes oppressors to dehumanize people. This is also an unjust act and prevents people to take part in the exercise to their rights. Pedagogy, as defined in the book of Freire, is something that must be forged with the oppressed in the incessant struggle to regain their humanity. The pedagogy of people engaged in the fight for their liberation begins with the interests that maintain themselves in the objects of humanitarianism. Liberation, for it to occur, according to Freire, the oppressed need to play an active role in becoming conscious of their situation and voluntarily working to change it through self-empowerment, to do whatever they want to do without manipulation and control, and also allowing themselves to do what needs to be done without inhibitions and restrictions. Liberation is tied both theoretically and practically to the notion of oppression and is conceived as a process of struggle against oppression, working to create change that can be achieved through praxis, the synthesis of reflection and action aimed at changing the world. Now, who should fight or lead the fights against oppression? Who should be involved? According to Freire, any movement to end oppression must be led by the oppressed people themselves. The oppressed must create their pedagogy of liberation rather than have it created for them to exit the structure of the oppression, because oppressed people need to lead the fight against oppression, and they are the ones who really know the feeling of being oppressed, and this is also finding a way to escape the abusive hands of their oppressors. Who is Paulo Freire, who wrote the book The Pedagogy of the Oppressed? Paulo Freire was one of the most influential philosophers of education in the 20th century. He worked wholeheartedly to help people both through his philosophy and his practice of critical pedagogy. A native of Brazil, Freire's goal was to eradicate illiteracy among people. His insights were rooted in the social and political realities of children and grandchildren of former slaves. Now, how do oppressors gain power over the oppressed? What are the mechanisms employed by the oppressors? Oppressors have a materialistic view of their lives. They seek transformation of the world, people, and time into ownable objects through their oppression. And since the oppressed ones have no rights, the oppressors use that idea or that fact as a detriment to the oppressed. Power stays in the hands of those who already have it, which is subject to domination or superiority. Power is the reflection of oppression. How can one fight oppression or overcome oppression? How can freedom be achieved by the oppressed according to Freire? Oppressed people can develop confidence and conviction when they learn about the root causes of oppression and see their oppressors as vulnerable. Along the way, oppressed people should engage in dialogue with others to push for freedom collectively. For them to achieve liberation, the oppressed need to be conscious of their actions and to become active participants so they know what to do to recapture the loss of their dignity as human beings. How does Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Freire a design to regain humanity? This pedagogy makes oppression and its causes objects of reflection by the oppressed, and from that reflection will come their necessary engagement in the struggle for liberation. They would need to participate in the reconstruction of society because humanization is the people's historical vocation. The pursuit of full humanity, however, cannot be carried out in isolation or individualism, but only in fellowship and solidarity as mentioned in the book. Therefore, it cannot unfold in the antagonistic relations between oppressors and the oppressed. No one can be authentically human while he prevents others from being so. Another critical concept introduced by Freire is dialogue. Dialogue is the polar opposite of hierarchy, implying a shift away from superiority and by extension inferiority and toward equality. Individuals can struggle for freedom without engaging in dialogue, resulting in an incomplete and insufficient movement. So we also cited examples of oppressor and oppressed situations based on history. First up, we have racial inequality. White supremacists came to power in all southern states by intimidating Black voters, deprived African Americans of voting rights and other civil liberties, extended from white-only schools to white-only graveyards. Anti-miscegenation laws forbade marriage and even sex between whites and non-whites. By the end of the 18th century, the term feudal system was used among the historians, and by the middle of the 19th century, feudalism had become a construct of medieval government and society. Feudalism became a buzzword for any oppressive, backward, hidebound system of government. The oppressive agrarian-based economic system discouraged unified government. Individual lords would divide their lands into smaller and smaller sections to give to lesser rulers and knights, and in turn would subdivide their own lands to give to even less important nobles and knights. In the 1800s, women usually stayed at home, cleaned the house, cooked food for the family, and sewed. They didn't even go out to work, and many girls didn't go to school. Women from very poor families worked as servants. Basically, women did not have basic rights. Cultural oppression of women can take many forms that time, including shaming and reinforcing their supposed inferior nature, or physically and mentally abusing them, including fewer political, social, and economic rights. Women were seen as property of their husbands and fathers. Women are not permitted to wear clothing of their own. They did not have their own decisions for themselves. Now, let us reflect on the learnings from this chapter from the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Chapter 1 attempts to help the oppressed to fight back to regain their loss of humanity and achieve full humanization. Here, manhood is the best term to describe avoiding oppression. Let us be the voice to tell everyone what freedom looks like, where we should be still and listen, and soon after the nation will follow and start making the world a better place through transformation. Now, for our takeaways, Freire goes on to encourage the oppressed groups to rise up and break free from the structures placed upon by their oppressors. They must investigate as a group what elements of oppression exist within the structures of society and create a pedagogy of liberation for all. With that, let me end my presentation with a quote from Freire: "Education is freedom. I, Hazel Angelyn Tesoro, Sir Gary Antonio Lirio, and Carla Jobelle Culajara, my group mates, thank you so much for listening.